Well, the Tigers win their first spring training game of the season. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to player preview Riley Greene. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets. If your first bet of $5 or more wins, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Alrighty, happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope your week is off to a good start here. We are going to discuss the Tigers' 4-0 victory, winning their first spring training game of the season. They are now 1-1-1. Pretty even across the board there after a 22-10 loss, a 9-9 tie, and now a 4-0 victory. So we're really all over the board here, which is, again, why I urge people to not really pay attention to too terribly much the final score of a lot of spring training games. But the Tigers did have a lot of their opening day lineup play in this game. So naturally, it wasn't televised because that just makes so much sense. But we are, of course, not that, AJ Hinch doesn't care if it's televised or not when he's making the lineup card, obviously. Just wish that games are a little bit more accessible in spring training, just like every other sports preseason. But that being said, we do have some numbers to go over. We do have some data to go over as well, especially when talking about Jack Flaherty. I think there's kind of an interesting conversation to be had there. So we're going to talk about that. And then a bulk of the show is going to be player previewing Riley Greene, one of the pillars of the future in terms of this franchise and what we want to accomplish, what this team wants to accomplish. A lot of it revolves around Riley Greene. So we're going to talk about him, what we can expect out of him in 2024. Let's start off by talking about this ball game, though. A 4-0 victory for your Detroit Tigers against the Houston Astros. Now, again, the Tigers played a lot of their opening day lineup and a lot of their opening day roster. Not all, but a lot, especially to start off the game. And the Astros very much did not. And there's a few guys sprinkled in there, don't get it wrong, and they had some of their higher prospects as well. But just to give you a little perspective, Dixon Machado started at third base for the Houston Astros. Okay, started. Not like, he pinch hit in the, sixth and finished the game. Their starting third baseman for this baseball game was Dixon Machado in 2024. So a little perspective there. Again, spring training wins and losses. I'm going to say it. I know I've already said it a billion times. I'm going to keep reiterating it because I feel like a lot of people have been holding a lot of stock in wins and losses. And I think that that's probably not the best exercise in my opinion. But I think really where I want to start, we can talk, like just pure numbers. Again, not televised, so not really sure how they looked exactly. But Torkelson, I know, had a bloop single. Evan Petzold of the Freep had a video of that from like his cell phone that you can kind of see a little bit the swing at least. Colt Keith had a hit in this one. Colt Keith's a guy, I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. I think he, in spring training, that is. I think he is going to get a lot of ABs and a lot of plate appearances just because they want him to face as much pitching as possible, especially early in games when you're actually facing, major league caliber players. And, the eighth inning of spring training games, you're talking about guys who maybe have not even made it past Double-A entering the game sometimes. So I think he's going to get a lot of work early in ball games. I expect Malloy to kind of be on a similar path, and just because they want to see they want to see how they react and how they do against that major league pitching. So, but Colt Keith with a knock in this one. Javi 0 for 2. Neither were strikeouts, though. It's really hard for me to really nitpick a box score on a game that wasn't televised. So let's get into kind of the real conversation that I want to have surrounding this ball game, which was Jack Flaherty, who went 1 inning, no hits, no runs, no walks, 2 strikeouts. So 1 inning of really, really good baseball. Not the best lineup. We've already talked about that. And only threw 10 total pitches. So a pretty small sample size. Not trying to overreact 10 pitches into the calendar year. Okay. Not what I'm trying to do. Not what I'm advocating for it either. As you can tell, I'm really trying to cover my bases with how early we are in spring training here. But when it comes to just pitch velocity, Jack Flaherty last season averaged 93.1 miles an hour on his four-seam fastball. Now, if you look at the biggest key differences, and we talked about this when we signed Flaherty, in the offseason, the biggest key differences between Flaherty when he was getting Cy Young votes and Flaherty last year was the fastball. The velocity's fallen off a little bit. And even if, it's not purely velocity, like it's not like it's dropped 5 miles an hour or anything like that. Even if it's not just straight up, how fast the ball's being thrown or how hard he's throwing it, also is just pure effectiveness. There are plenty of dudes out there that have a really good fastballs that, are 91 to 92 miles an hour. A lot of guys out there. And he just hasn't had it. Whether it's, spin going down, velo, just effectiveness, just from a command perspective, right? Just hasn't had it. And so in this game, he threw 4 four-seam fastballs. Okay. So we're looking at a sample size of 4 pitches in February. But they were 93 miles an hour and then 95.6, 95, and 94.6. So 3 of those 4 were comfortably faster than what he averaged last season. And then if you look at his overall, just like every pitch, at Database Hit on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, was the first person I saw tweet out like the whole chart, but the information's available to everybody on Baseball Savant. You can go look yourself. His velocity on all of his pitches was way up. And maybe it's just, adrenaline or excitement of getting the first outing of the spring, or he only knew he was going to throw 1 inning, so he kind of let it all out there, or whatever. But was up a mile and a half average on his fastball from last year, was up 2 miles an hour on his changeup, 3.1 miles an hour on the slider, 1.3 on the sinker, and 1.6 on the knuckle curve. So A, glad he was able to throw everything in only 10 pitches, but B, he is up considerably across the board. All 5 pitches that he threw were well over a mile an hour faster on average than what he was averaging last season. So that's good. We'll take it, right? Again, we're very small into the spring. We'll see, when he gets stretched out longer and longer, if he can maintain that. But as far as, first appearances of spring training go, I don't think you can get too much better than a perfect inning with 2 strikeouts and your stuff being thrown harder than it ever was last season. I think that's a pretty good start. Or not ever was, but was on average last season. Will Vest pitched in this game, had a walk and a strikeout. Tyler Holton with a walk and a strikeout. Bo Brisky, 2 innings, no base runners, and 2 strikeouts. Really good start to the campaign from him. And then the last person we're going to talk about here before we get into Riley Greene was Joey Wentz pitched in this ball game. And he pitched toward the end of the game, had 2 innings, 1 hit, no earned runs, 2 walks, and 5 strikeouts. So 5 of his 6 outs that he recorded were strikeouts, but did allow 3 base runners. Was not facing, the greatest lineup either there, especially that deep into the ball game. But another thing we're going to look at is his velo, right? Now that there's a huge difference between, like this happens with everybody. You move him to the bullpen, and the velocity goes up because you can kind of let it all hang out there. You don't have to save your velo for anything. That was the big thing with Gregory Soto, came up as a starter, and they were like, let's put you in the bullpen. And then he started pumping a hundo. And they're like, all right, you're going to be a reliever. Congratulations. So not that, not trying to compare Joey Wentz to Gregory Soto, just an example, because that happens really across the board. And Joey Wentz, a mile an hour faster on average on his four-seam fastball, 2.1 faster on the cutter, half a mile an hour on the curve, and 1.3 on the changeup. But his cutter peaked at 89.5 miles an hour in this game. If he can throw 96.2, which is what the four seam maxed out as, if he can throw that paired with an 89 or even 90-mile-an-hour cutter, and then, the changeup that we know was actually one of the few solid pitches he had last season, that's not a bad trio. There is something to work with there, especially out of the bullpen if you can go multiple innings. So we're going to keep an eye on Joey Wentz, but obviously a huge spring training for him. We talked about that yesterday. A guy who has a lot riding on the spring, maybe more than anybody, just because he's out of options. So we'll keep an eye on that, but a good start to spring from him as well. So yeah, 4-0 victory. There you go for your Detroit Tigers against the Houston Astros here. Now 1-1-1 on the spring. Yeah, let's talk about Riley Greene. We will do that right after this. Passion and drive is really the name of the game when it comes to eBay Motors, and it's what brings home the winning trophy to keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back tomorrow talking about some player previews as we keep the ball rolling with that. The Tigers also play the Baltimore Orioles at 1 p.m. on Tuesday. Matt Manning against Grayson Rodriguez. So a pretty interesting pitching matchup from both sides. We know what we're looking for with Matt Manning. We'll get to him a little bit more when we do the player preview with him. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow. We'll see. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that is now available on Amazon Fire TV as well, in the Fire TV channels app. Okay, Riley Greene. I think I once called him the franchise back probably a few years ago now. Riley Greene is an incredible talent. And obviously the biggest thing, we don't have to bury the lead here. Everyone's pretty well aware that the biggest thing that we are looking for out of Riley Greene is just simply to stay healthy. He has not played 100 games in a season yet. We're 2 years in. But I believe it's 93 games or 94 games. And then last year was 99 games. So just missed out on that. Not only obviously in year one, he had the foul ball off his foot, broke his foot, missed the first half of the year. And then in year two, last season, had the shin stress fracture, but they didn't call it a fracture, stress injury, I think is what they ended up calling it. That sidelined him for about a month and a half there in the middle of the summer. And then again to end the season, obviously, with the contact-induced Tommy John surgery, which is still so wild to me. So for starters, when it comes to his current health, there seems to be very little limitations and very little worry about him going forward. The biggest reason for that is because the Tommy John is on his non-throwing arm. So like, who cares? I'm not going to be that loose with it. Obviously, he taking swings with an arm that is dead or needs TJ is a different beast, but significantly easier and quicker recovery when you're talking about it. Like, it's, if you had to get Tommy John, right? If you had to, you would pick a position player in their non-throwing arm. That is best case scenario for stuff like that. He's certainly going to get a lot of designated hitter work in spring training to kind of slowly ease him back into it. And I would imagine in the first couple of months of the regular season, they're not going to be shy about giving him reps at designated hitter as well either. I think that's one of the reasons they went out and felt comfortable and fine with having a rather deep outfield, because obviously there's defensive concerns, we'll say, about, long term about Kerry Carpenter and Justin Henry Malloy as is. But when you also throw in there, one of your guys is going to be playing some DH and you want to kind of ease him back into it, that makes that kind of a slam dunk to make that one of your deeper positional groups. So that is all I have, right? They're slowly working him back into it. He's still on the injury report, but it's listed as like an elbow sprain now. And we'll see. I am not worried about it until it becomes an issue. But the biggest thing, like, again, we all are very well aware that he's uber talented, and we're very well aware that everybody's number one on their wish list item for Riley Greene in 2024 is just to have a full healthy season. So we don't have to beat around the bush there. We can just kind of call it what it is. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to pull that off. They're going to move him to the corner outfield. I think that's a good start. I think Parker Meadows is a better defensive center fielder anyways. So kind of two birds with one stone. You protect Riley Greene a little bit more, and you improve your team defense by putting Parker in center field. But besides that, it's just like some of it's unlucky, right? He took a foul ball off the foot. And I don't know. And there's some people out there that don't want him to be as aggressive diving for balls. I mean, that's one of the things that, kind of sparked a lot of interest from people that weren't following him in the minor leagues and hadn't really heard of him before he was in the majors. Was just he was making a lot of diving plays out in center field, and he was this really exciting electric player. I think there's certainly an argument for that, but I also it's a fine line. It's a real fine line between you, you don't want him to not want to do anything to win either. It's a really fine line they're trying to walk with him. But for this year, I am expecting him to play corner outfield, play DH a little bit more earlier. Probably will get fewer and fewer as the season goes along, and just please stay healthy. Okay. So now that we got all of that out of the way, let's talk about the player himself. Last season, like I said, in 99 games for the Detroit Tigers, had a 288 average, a 349 OBP, and a 447 slug. That was a 119 WRC plus, so 19% better than league average hitter, according to weighted runs created. Had an 8.4% walk rate, which is almost exactly league average. I think league average was about 8.5 or 8.6 last year. And then a 27.4% K rate, which is obviously higher than league average. Was good enough for a 2.3 Fangraphs WAR last season, and that OPS ended at 796. So now that I just threw a bunch of numbers at you, it's a pretty solid season, right? Obviously, the season you could kind of break down month by month. He got off to a really slow start. And then in May, he was legitimately one of the 3 to 4 best hitters on the entire planet. Had an OPS over 1,000 with an average of 365. He was absolutely crushing the baseball. 11 home runs in like 25 games. I mean, just remarkable stuff. Then in July, you had the injury, obviously, in there as well, but a 942 OPS in July. Did not have a single at-bat in June, unfortunately. But you have that May and July back-to-back of 1,000 OPS and 942 OPS. August, he starts hitting the ball on the ground a little bit more. We'll talk about that in a second. 668 OPS. And then September, plays in one game before getting hurt. Crushed in that one game, for whatever that's worth to you. Had a technically a 1334 OPS in September, but 3 plate appearances, obviously. So pre-All-Star break, 835 OPS, post-All-Star break, 746. Just threw even more numbers at you. I apologize for that. But, you saw the glimpse. You saw the flash of greatness. You saw why everybody has been so high on this kid since they drafted him. You saw why people have been talking about him being the centerpiece to this rebuild, even after, drafting Torkelson. And even, obviously Casey Mize went the year before him, and both of those guys are number 1 overall picks. And kind of just constantly, at least on this show, obviously everybody has their own opinion, but he was always the one, right? He was the one that you kind of looked at and you were like, if there's a guy that is going to be this all-encompassing kind of can do it all type of player that has the ceiling and the potential to get MVP votes at some point in his career, this is the one. So let's talk about a little bit more of what we saw out of him in 2023. Obviously, we just did kind of baseline stats. I want to talk about the profile, specifically what he struggled in, what he can get better in, and then we'll talk about what we're kind of expecting out of him, assuming health in 2024. We'll do all of that right after this. Get buckets this NBA season and get buckets on your first bet as well with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, you can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. This is one of the most fun points in the NBA season when you start getting these playoff races and such. Will the Pistons win double-digit games? Who knows? All right. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So one of the things I want to start with, and this is a very kind of simple thing to point out, I want him to hit better with runners in scoring position. We talked about it a little bit mid-season last year, but him and Torkelson both, we'll talk about that with Tork's player preview as well, need to be a lot better with runners in scoring position. And I'm not a person that, like those are fewer. This is a much smaller sample size. I'm not a person that takes like a ton of weight into that necessarily, but it does matter if you are going to be a middle of the lineup bat on a good team. So now we'll see, right? Season 3 for him, but maybe just finally getting a full season under his belt, another offseason to improve, etc. I'm hoping and I'm expecting him to get better in that department, but a 668 OPS and a 250 average, had a 352 OBP, just very little power. 316 slug with runners in scoring position. So just need him to be a little bit better in those situations if he is going to be that 2 or 3 hitter for the Tigers for the foreseeable future. That's a big thing, kind of an easy thing to point out. Let's throw let's throw some more numbers at you. Let's just keep apologizing for it, but not stopping either. Just remarkable. Expected batting average, 92nd percentile. Expected slug, 88th percentile. Hard hit rate, 82nd percentile. Really, you pick. Average exit velo, 85th. Expected weighted on base percentage, 89th percentile. Like, when it comes to just the pure hitting numbers, whether it was the actual hitting numbers or the expected hitting numbers, all of them are not only in the top quarter of the league, they're in the top 10 to 12% in baseball pretty consistently across the board. The two things with his profile that I want to see him improve on. One is walk a little bit more. And he's not a bad walk guy. This isn't a guy that doesn't draw walks. Again, 49th percentile. We talked about it. 8.4% is just a hair below what league average was. So he's basically was a league average walker last year. If we can get that into like the 9%, we're talking about a guy who's going to have an OPS well into the 800s this season, like mid 800s. If he's, maintaining all of the batting average and hard hit ball stuff that he had last year while raising that, if he raises it, 0.7%, I'm not even asking for some huge, you got to walk 10% of the time thing. If you can even raise that 0.5% or a little bit more, I think that would go a long way. Now, the one thing that everybody pointed out last year and constantly gets brought up with Riley Greene is that he does strike out. Again, 27.4% K rate, 28.2% swing and miss rate last season. He was above league average in chasing, so he doesn't expand the zone a ton. Still does it, right? 64th percentile, not like he's I'm trying to think of Kevin Youkilis, I guess. Sure. Trying to think of somebody who draws a lot of walks. Not Mark Canha, right? But is certainly a guy that doesn't expand the zone a boatload, but does have holes in his strike zone. And that's what I want to break down here really quickly and just talk a little bit about those zones and where his weaknesses are when it comes to the strike zone. So obviously, lefty, one of the big, it's been around for 100 years. It'll be around for 100 more. Lefty, low and away is a big danger zone just because of the angle. And it's really hard to lay off of low, sliders or curveballs low and away if you're a lefty hitter and a lefty pitcher is on the mound. So that's a tale as old as time. He could get better in that. He swung and missed a lot at balls that were low and away coming from left-handers. But I think the biggest thing, the most noteworthy thing to me, aside from just like the chasing the ball low, which he has a tendency to do and has for most of his major league career, if we can cut down on that a little bit, that'd be great. But up and away from him, no matter what handness the pitcher is really a danger zone. Well, he doesn't do any damage. It's a very much a black hole kind of. His swing and miss rate on balls up and away. So if you are to make the strike zone a 3x3 grid of 9 boxes, the box that is in the upper left-hand corner of the strike zone, the up and away corner, 71% whiff rate. That is astronomically high. That is absurd. Right. So, and does swing the bat there. Right. So, I think that is something, and that's against lefties specifically, not against both, but even against both, 39% whiff rate, 35% strike rate. That's comfortably the highest of balls that are actually in the strike zone. So that's a big thing I want to see him improve on. And some of that just comes from, he has a swing where the bat stays in the zone for a while. And so his bat plane just naturally is going to make those pitches tougher to get to. So that's something he's got to improve on and make adjustments on and figure out how to not have that be such a dead zone, because I mean, it's the major leagues. People are going to exploit that if they have the ability to. So that is kind of the biggest thing I wanted to point out. But I mean, look, this guy is unbelievably impressive. I mean, if you're just looking at like batting average in each spot, I mean, there's 400s, 39, like even that dead zone, quote unquote, I was talking to, his average there is 267 and his slug is 733. Like he when he does hit the ball, he hits the ball hard. And that leads me to one of my final points with him, which is lifting the baseball. And this is one, if you're a longtime listener of this show, this has been something that I've been harping on since he broke into the majors and will continue to do so until he completely eradicates it from it. But we took a huge step in the right direction this past season. In 2022, when he was a rookie, he had a whopping 56.8% ground ball rate. That is astronomically high. And it just everything to the pull side specifically was a ground ball. And he was able to lift the ball to the opposite field, but anytime he pulled the ball, it was a ground ball to second base. And it was unbelievably frustrating. And he had an OPS of 683 as a rookie. And that was a big reason as to why. But last season, with that OPS just under 800 on the year, when you look at the ground ball rate, it plummeted down to 48.9%. Now, Major League Baseball's average is 44.6. So he was still pretty comfortably higher than league average when it came to ground balls, and but was much higher with the line drive rate, was well above league average in line drive rate, 4% better than league average. But that is still something I want to see him continue to improve on. I don't want there to be any question and any narrative out there that, if you throw it in a certain spot, he's just going to drive it into the ground. And again, made huge strides, right? In April, he was still grounding out a boatload, and that's why his numbers sucked. And then in May and July, he started lifting the ball to the pull side, and that plummeted. So even that high percentage, where it's still 4% higher than league average, is kind of like, at the very beginning of the season and then right before the injury again is kind of when he got in those ruts. So if that's something that he can fix throughout a full season, again, we're talking about a guy that really could explode this season and have an OPS well into the 800s, if not the mid 800s. So the last thing I want to point out before I send you on your way is just pitches that he faces. The one weird thing, I mean, he hits well against pretty much everything because he's Riley Greene and he's Superman. But the one weird one that I noticed was that against four-seam fastballs from lefties, he hit 188 last year. And like against righties, he crushed. He hit like 330 or something ridiculous, right? And like hit 276 against lefty sliders. Like, so even for as much as I talk about, like maybe laying off those balls low and away from lefties, like still was able to. He swung and missed a lot, really high whiff rate with them, but was still able to put the bat on the ball and was still able to have some extra base hits with them. So I think improving on lefties, I point out the fastball here, but I think improving on lefties is just a big thing that I want to see in general from him. If we look at his splits last season against lefties, he had a 693 OPS, and against righties had an 826. Obviously, a huge difference there. But the batting average against lefties was still just about 280 at 279. So really, and his OBP was 333. That's not as high as it was against righties, but it's still pretty solid. I think the biggest thing is just he has no power against lefties so far as a major leaguer. And that gets us into our final point here is for this to be a successful season, I think we all would like to see the power numbers go up a little bit. Here's a wild stat. Riley Greene not only did not have a home run against a lefty in 2023, he does not have a home run against a left-handed pitcher yet in his Major League Baseball career. That is a huge thing that he needs to improve on. Now, I think he will, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. Again, we just talked about like he hit well against fastballs against lefties in 2022, struggled against them in 2023, but he's proven he can do it at the major league level. So we're going to take that as a sign that he can improve on that for sure. Obviously, not grounding out so much is just inherently going to get more opportunities to hit the ball hard in the air. But I think that's a really big reason for it. Like he had 3 RBIs against lefties last season, and that's like a really like weird specific stat. Like it doesn't tell the full story certainly, but just trying to like articulate like he could really improve the power numbers against lefties a lot, and the average is still there, which is what again gives me hope. It's not like this dude is batting 220 against lefties. He hit 280 against lefties last year. They were just all singles. So I think that is something we're kind of waiting to see. And this is only this is really getting super nitpicky. And that's why we're only doing Riley Greene today. And we're spending most of the entire show talking about one guy, is because so much weight is on his shoulders and so much expectation is put on him. We're this wouldn't even be a conversation if we were talking about Zach McKinstry or something. This is just when you're breaking down a guy that has the expectations of being the franchise player, you look at what does he have to do to become the franchise player? And that's kind of what we're laying out for you here. So, I think that'll go a long way, just seeing the power numbers improve in general. But again, if this guy walks at a league average clip, the strikeout numbers don't dip, all of the other just bat to ball and hard hit ball skills that he had last year that he did very, very well at and was phenomenal at maintain, which we have no reason to believe they won't. If you raise that home run total and you start creeping up into a guy that's going to hit you, even, I'm not even asking for like 28, 32 home runs. If he can just be a 20 to 25 home run guy and hit a lot of doubles, you're talking about an 850 or maybe even a little bit higher OPS out of him this season. In the corner outfield, I expect him to actually be a better defender in the corner than he was in center. He was a net zero defender in center field last year and was a +1 in left field. Really excited about what he can do in the corners. Was a plus base runner last year, pretty fast, 71st percentile. So not like game-breaking Parker Meadows speed, but still good speed no less. League average arm. I mean, what else can I throw at you before I send you on your way? I think that's pretty much it, man. There's a lot of nitpickiness when it comes to a guy that has the expectations of being, Superman. And I love Riley Greene to death. I am so excited about his season. Assuming health, I'm expecting him to take a massive step forward. I'm expecting him to clean up most of the things that I just talked about. Maybe it's not fair to say that he's going to do all of those things, because then you're talking about a guy who's, gonna potentially win MVP. But 2.3 WAR in less than 100 games, man. I mean, you're talking about a guy who I think this year could put up a 4 to 4.5 win season if he stays healthy, and that's all-star caliber type of year. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. The strikeouts are going to be there, but as long as they're not, astronomical, he avoided, he was outside of the bottom fifth in baseball in Ks. Like, it's not like he's striking out like Joey Gallo. If he can keep that, somewhat in that area, and then take a look at everything else, those are all the things that I feel like if he tightens those up, you're really going to see a huge takeoff here from Greene. I'm very, very excited. I don't think my opinions changed too much from 3 years ago when he was in Double-A, and I said that he was the franchise here on air. I don't think that's changed too much. I fully expect this dude to be one of the best players on the team, if not the best player on the team, when the Tigers are competing for a World Series again. Okay, and this year's a big step. This also, I don't think this is a final product here. He's only 23 years old, man. So if he goes and he takes a step forward and has, an 830 OPS this year, then that's a great step in the right direction. And I'm going to expect him to take another step forward the year after that. I don't think that this year has to be like final product, final version of him, Riley Greene. But yeah, assuming health, I'm expecting a pretty darn good year out of the former number one prospect in baseball. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers. That was like 2 weeks, not even. I think he was the number one prospect for like days, because Rutschman got called up and then he was there. And then he also then obviously got called up and whatnot. So he was the top prospect in baseball for like hours. But technically, thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every day. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Also, big apologies to the lateness of the audio version of yesterday's show. Network wide, we're switching the platform in which we upload our videos to, or our audio to rather. So the switch took about 12 hours to buffer. So the episode went up, in the middle of the afternoon rather than at midnight like I usually like it to. So I'm sorry, but it's all done. Transition's over, all set. Won't happen again. Okay, cool. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.